Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. Hi to Ralphie and everybody who's joined us today. Like Ari said, I don't know, I have a brand new computer, a Mac computer, and there's some problems going on with Zoom, linking with PowerPoint. And so sometimes my PowerPoint does get stuck. It's kind of random. So we're going to hope for the best. Otherwise, we'll just, have it in a different format. So please bear with us if that happens. I also wanted to say one other thing, since Ari has introduced Ralphie, that yes, Ralphie's like my brother, his family is like my family, and he's been doing amazing tours. Every time I go to India, I just have to say, Ralphie, I'm coming, and he just arranges everything. We were going to do, but the pandemic hit, a Jewish India tour with me, with me bringing several people from the synagogues here. But we will be doing, hopefully, that tour in 2023, right, Ralphie? I mean, when we open it up to questions, we would love to take more inquiries about that. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the January 2022 one because of the pandemic. But without any more waiting, I'm going to share my screen. And let's hope this slide play show works. And if it goes forward, yes, it does. So let's hope for the best. I am a Bene Israel Jew from India. My family gradually dispersed mostly to Israel and America, but my parents remained in India. I'm also now an American living and working in New Jersey, but I still recall the ornate synagogues of my childhood, the oil lamps, the velvet and silver covered Torahs, a chair left vacant for the prophet Elijah in our Bombay synagogues. Having grown up in a predominantly Hindu-Muslim society, being educated in Catholic and Zoroastrian schools, being raised Jewish in India, and now living in America, I have always had to reflect on those cultural boundary zones. And I'm going to share with you what those cultural boundary zones came up in my work and in my life. And so these are some photographs. This is, of course, the one of the oldest synagogues in Cochin. This is the Magen David Synagogue in Mumbai. These are just a few images of which are going to be featured in my upcoming, already out book, Growing Up Jewish in India. But this is a family photo. This is my aunt, actually, and her family just before they left for Israel. So my aunt is sitting with a baby on her lap. She lives in Nahariya. She had 2 more kids, and all of them live in Israel right now. So there were large numbers of families and people, hordes of families leaving. My parents did not leave because they had a good jobs and they did well for themselves, so they didn't feel like leaving. But this is some of the pictures that I found in my parents' albums, which are very intriguing and amazing. And also, after coming to America, I was told many times Jews have put henna on their hands during weddings. Jews don't eat. I mean, you didn't grow up with matzo ball soup. You don't know what gefilte fish is. I'm like, no, we did not do all of the above. And so these kind of questions sort of made me realize that how different, or how much the other I was, even being in my community of Jewish people. But at the same time, I also felt very welcomed within the Jewish community, the Ashkenazi Jewish community. They wanted to know more about where I came from. They wanted to know what the customs were, the food was. And so that sort of, instead of avoiding that question all the time and saying, well, I'm just from India, I've started saying very often, or now I almost always say, when people ask me, where are you from? Because they can't exactly tell, I say, I am a Jew from India. So that kind of explains the whole thing in one sentence. They ask me more questions, and I proudly say that I'm from India, but I also proudly say that I'm a Jew from India. So that uniqueness is just spelled out in one sentence. These are some photographs that I found in my parents' album. This is my mother, and this is another photograph of an Indian Jewish bride with a henna on her hand. This is my mother putting henna on the fingers of her sister-in-law. And just like any Jewish community around the world, Indian Jews, which I suspect they came from, we were not Ashkenazi Jews. We are probably from Iran, Iraq, and that my grandmother was a Jew born in Quetta, Pakistan. So that is near the Afghani border. So there were Jews there for thousands of years. Very often people don't know that, but the famous story of Esther coming from, being an Iranian Jew and it being an Iranian story, lest we forget that the first line in the story of Esther says that, King Ahasuerus ruled from India to Ethiopia, being in a Persian king. So these kind of customs were very unique, very normal to me, but very unique when I came to live abroad. And so when I showed pictures like this, where, this is a photograph taken by the famous photographer Joan Roth in her book, Jewish Women Around the World, and it shows, Indian Jewish bride hands, showing the henna on the hands. And I said, Muslim tradition, Hindu tradition, and Jewish tradition adopted many of these traditions, like which they shared with each other. Just like when my grandmother went to live in Cleveland, Ohio in the later years with my uncle, and she said, Polish food, is that Jewish food? Not knowing that, European food was influenced by European people and European culture. And so similarly, she had a different kind of similar reaction. This is a few other very unique pictures that I found in my family album. This is my great-great-grandfather. And he, as you can see, he's wearing a suit, and on that suit there is a chain, and the chain has the Star of David. He has a turban, long beard, long coats. So a lot of the Oriental or the non-Western Jews dressed in turbans, just like David Sassoon and his family also did. So this is another picture of my parents when they got married in 1950. If you want to notice the melange of different iconography within this picture, my mother is wearing a white sari with gold Indian jewelry with gloves, and under the gloves is the henna, and she's wearing a veil and wreath and flowers. And so you can see that the mixture of the culture just happening within the community after hundreds and hundreds of years of living there. This is my newest book. It's our newest book. It's edited by Ori Soltis, and the foreword is written by Ralphie. And we have got many different contributors writing about the different sects of Indian Jews. And then I have written a chapter, a kind of biographical chapter as to what it was growing up Jewish in India, therefore the title of the book. And then Ori has written a whole chapter or two about my art and how my Indian Jewishness and the Indianness influences my work and continues to influence it as a contemporary artist today. So in my paintings, I combine the imagery of my past with the role I play in America today, making a mosaic inspired both by Indian, Persian miniature paintings. So here's an example of Indian miniature painting where a goddess with many arms is slaying a dragon, which has slaying a bull, or which has a demon in it. And so the Indian Hindu iconography, but then there were also the Muslim Indian miniature paintings, which I studied both in India and when I came here to the US. And also I'm influenced by illuminated manuscripts, both Jewish and Christian and Islamic in illuminated manuscripts in my work. So I am a transcultural artist. I believe that transculturalism will help in artistic and other ways to be a bridge between the traditional and the modern. This bridging not only affects recent immigrants in this country, but also Americans that have lived here for generations. So people can learn new ways to communicate and have artistic discourse with each other. So if you ask, what is a transcultural person? For me, a transcultural person is rather like a chameleon, being able to change his or her colors according to the situation and environment. Today's world politics pushes and promotes a need for a sense of belonging, a push to take sides, either black or white. The gray scale in between needs to be explored so that when one makes final evaluations, it is painted with a fairness that allows us to learn about all perspectives and points of view. So my work is kind of about bridging cultures. It's about issues of identity, immigration, about socio-political situations of what's happening today. And also I'm a visual storyteller. So I like to take stories, whether mostly Midrashic stories, but then also stories from my other cultures that I come from, whether it's Hindu or Muslim. And I like to recycle them and use them as a jumping board to talk about today's socio-political situations or issues of identity or feminism. In this case, this figure is wearing a Stars and Stripes sari. She's holding a mirror. She's Rebecca. She's standing by the well, but she's a new immigrant. So she's asking different kinds of questions here. I also have, besides having an education both in Eastern and Western art, I have an MFA in painting, like Ari said, but also have a second MFA in theater set design, which influenced me greatly. So the whole concept of reading plays, of analyzing them, of making models like this and realizing the sets into final designs on the stage, doing renderings and capturing the essence of the story and then having them realized on stage gave me the foundation to understand that I am a storyteller, that I love to tell stories. And then later on, when I came to live in the East Coast area, where I met a lot more Jewish rabbis and people, I was asked by a rabbi once, "You should study Midrash." And I said, "I'm not very religious. I don't want to make religious art." And he said, "There's nothing to do with religion. It's about recycling mythology." And that's when I started delving and studying with him and several other rabbis, including Rabbi Burton Vysotsky at JTS. And it changed my life. It became very interesting to me. Midrash became a way to kind of delve into different stories and to be able to learn to recycle them, to bring them forth to today. So as an example, looking at this old Indian miniature painting, it is a Mughal miniature. A woman is sitting idyllically in a garden, smoking a hookah. In my painting, Finding Home number 28, a figure, myself in blue jeans, is seated in a traditional miniature landscape, is sipping Coke through a long straw, which suggests a hookah. I'm imbibing the intoxicating American elixir poison Coca-Cola, symbolizing the lure of the West, which draws me to reside in the US. In the background, the house says mother or Ima in Hebrew and represents the home I was leaving when I immigrated to the US. There is a demon on top of the painting with a gun and a nuclear weapon, suggesting that war will infiltrate and further disrupt the scene. So these are just a few points, and there's a lot of layering in both in paint and in iconography in every painting, but I'm going to point a few things out and take you on to the next one. In Zacham, which is Finding Home number 56, is inspired from a page in the Quran, but also from Jewish illuminated manuscripts. Are the swords a weapon that will descend on her, or are they a protection against unforeseen dangers? What seems like Urdu or Arabic writing above actually spells out "it's unfortunate" in English. So I like to play with words, with iconography, with different languages, with different cultures, and sort of twist them and kind of have fun with them too, like in this. And then at the bottom, she's wearing her sari, which becomes the umbilical cord to feeding the plants. In the middle, there's a shama that is a protective emblem for her, which was taught to me as a child to always say before going to bed at every night. So all these sort of things, sort of this melange that are happening and this mixtures of cultures and things that are coming out in my work. And inspired by this Mughal miniature example of King Akbar holding a globe with his hand on the sword, I did this painting, which is called Sister, Finding Home number 45, is done in response to the Middle East crises. Half Jewish and half Muslim, both her hands display the rich henna of their similarities. They seem peaceful, yet in front of them there is a blasting plunger and wires that indicate a bomb connected to them. Will they destroy themselves, or is there any hope that they will be saved from themselves? And going on to one more piece in the Finding Home series, which is also inspired by a sub-series that took place, which is called Farishte. Farishte in Urdu Arabic means angels. And I explore the women of the Torah and bring them forward to combat the wars and violence of today in a midrash or interpretation of intricate paintings. It is through all this that I can dip into my own personal specifics and universalize, thus playing the role of an artist activist. So in this case, Vashti, I wrote the sort of poem prose about her. Vashti is the wife of King Ahasuerus in the story of Queen Esther. She disappears after the first scene and is never seen again. In this case, she comes back. Vashti was cast out. Now she looks in, a black and white setting from yesteryear, postcards from another target, a chessboard of genocide, the near Tamid of a lost synagogue, a palace of another dictator, smokestacks from your ancestors' crematorium. I searched during my journey but cannot find. How can they erase without a trace, I wonder? Now more than necessary, along with her dignity, will she restore yours? And going on to the next painting, a couple more in this series. Finding home number 74 is based on the Jewish legends about Lilith, who was the first Eve, who was created the same time as Adam. She was unwilling to forego her equality with Adam. Rebuffed, she took her case to God, who responded to her seductive powers by revealing his divine name. She earned her ticket out of Pardes and into eternal exile. Thus, Lilith has been called the demoness and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Lilith made a return in feminist history as an example of female strength and mystery. So here she comes back asking for revenge, asking for justice. She could be a warring widow. She could be belonging to either side, Palestinian, Israeli, Pakistani, Indian, Rwandan, anything. And I don't wish to take sides. So in this case, Roy Lichtenstein, like you see over here as an example, a famous American painter, combined with the drama of Indian Amar Chitra Katha comics, and of course, Bollywood, which I grew up with in Bombay when I grew up till I came to this country when I was in my early 20s, serve as an inspiration for my Lilith series. Indian Persian miniature paintings and illuminated manuscripts also creep into parts of the paintings. The blonde heroine in Lichtenstein's paintings has been now cast as a blue maiden. So you will ask the next question, what's this blue all about? Why blue? Why are they all blue? What does it mean? Is it a Krishna? Is it some kind of Indian god? Well, it could be a little bit influenced from that, but in my case, very often I look at my skin and it has turned blue. It tends to do that when I face certain situations of people stereotyping and categorizing other people who are unlike themselves. I have therefore over the years developed many blue skin characters in my paintings. This blue self-portrait takes on many roles and forms through which I can theatrically explore ancient and contemporary dilemmas. In this process of recycling and rejuvenating, they merely remind me in making the work, and hopefully my audience in viewing the work, that myth making is cyclical and timeless. Thus, the blue skin has become a symbol for me of being a Jewish woman of color. So it became a joke. Where are you from? India. Well, oh, so you're Hindu, you're Muslim, you're Buddhist, no, I am Jewish. And then they would either fall down in surprise or say, oh my God, I've heard about people being Jewish over there. And I say, yeah, they've been Jewish over there for 2,000 years. And so the whole story I have to tell about how we are and who we are. And this was way before my book came out, and that inspired me to do this book. And so I would tell them the story about how I was raised Jewish in India, and they would either kind of not believe me, or they would be surprised and be intrigued and want to find out more. And so therefore I slowly sort of turned blue, and it became a joke, and I started creating these characters that were acting out parts for me on the stage of my paintings. I also went further because of my influence in theater set design. I started collaborating with dancers. I started painting them personally myself blue so they could pop out of the paintings. Like for me, and they would act, they would come into my galleries and the museums that I had my shows. They would come on stage, or they would do performances. They would act out parts of my paintings and retell the story. They would appear at different events, whether it is my commercial events, where here in this case, I did 7 6-foot artworks for a hotel. And the opening, the owners of the hotel said, we want your blue dancers to show up. So they did. So I also work with live dancers like this, and I paint them blue. Then I'd like to go on really quickly to showing you a few examples about how I can use my style and the essence of who I have developed as an artist into the bigger world, into how I can, number one, make a living. Number two, spread the joy of whom I feel that I want to share with others. And so I started getting a lot of, and I still do, getting a lot of commercial projects, which I did 7 6-foot artworks for this hotel. It's a Marriott boutique hotel where I did 7 seasons on the 7 floors of the hotel. This also paid my bills for about a year. And so that was, something that I do also on the side very much. I have several commissions on right now that I can tell you later about too. I also recently did a parochet and an amud for a synagogue in Pennsylvania, where I did the painting, and then the painting was translated and printed onto fabric and made into the Torah curtain and the Torah cover, the Torah table cover for the synagogue. I also have done painting. I had also did a painting for CRC in St. Louis, where they actually went with me on a trip conducted by Ralphie to India, and the rabbi Susan Talvi, and we conceived about this idea where they said they wanted me to do a floor. And we came back, and a year later or so, I did a painting, and I designed a 16-foot diameter circular floor for the entrance of their synagogue, which has the Jewish holidays, the Hebrew months, the 12 tribes, and right in the center is Dina. Because Rabbi Susan is a feminist rabbi, we made Dina as the 13th tribe right in the center of the circle. And this is made out of porcelain tiles. So I work with many different manufacturers, like everything from ceramics to fabric to dye bond for larger outdoor murals, etc. One of the other commissions I have done is I did a 15-foot long Megillat Esther. And again, I was commissioned to do it in the Indian miniature style. It is where Esther is actually painted blue, also to symbolize the mask that she had to put on in the story to hide her Jewish identity. So it was very pertinent, and the large Fifth Avenue gallery that commissioned me told me that this is the reason we want you to do it, is because we want Esther to be blue. So this is the gallery in Fifth Avenue that commissioned me to do. I painted for the first time on real parchment, which was animal skin. It was kosher and it came from Israel. And all the writing was done by a kosher scribe in Israel. So this is one of the commissions that I've done. I also recently did another commission of a 9-foot long scroll for a synagogue in Pennsylvania, where I illustrated the story of the lost scrolls from lost East Czechoslovakia, and how they were hidden in a church in Prague during World War II, and then how they were transferred to the Westminster Synagogue. And now this synagogue had one of the scrolls. And so they wanted to commemorate it and commemorate the Holocaust and do a celebration of this survival of the scrolls. And so I did that 9-foot long scroll for the synagogue, telling the whole story about the scrolls. I don't have a picture here about it, but it is on my website, or will be on my website sometime soon. I also do private commissions, like this one is for a home in Florida. I'm doing 2 private commissions right now, for a home in Manhattan and for another home in Philadelphia. And so I work with the families, or whatever the subject matter they want to do, and I bring forth whatever the colors. I sometimes work with interior designers or the family themselves to bring out the iconography as to what they want their painting about. This is the final painting framed in the Florida home. I also do some furniture. I've done benches and coffee tables, and this is a Torah Ark, which I did for SAR Jewish Day School in the Bronx, and it is currently in their Beit Midrash. It holds 2 Torah scrolls. So it's a small Torah Ark. It's done with 22 karat gold leaf and gouache and acrylic paint. Also recently, I got a very different kind of commission where I was asked to illustrate a children's book. And the children's book was about the song Hava Nagila. And again, the story said that Hava, who is a young girl who comes from the Ukraine, and she represents being the song. And then she goes to Israel from the Ukraine and meets Hora. And again, I thought, I started looking at, Ukrainian dresses and how the younger girls would be what they'd be wearing and how they would look. And again, the publisher said, we want you to paint Hava and Hora blue skinned because it is such a symbol of being a transcultural Jewish person, that she came from somewhere and went somewhere and spread this universal song of joy, which is enjoyed by so many different people around the world. So it's, again, very apt that you would paint her with your blue skin. And so this book is just out. It is, here's the cover. It's actually being launched on November 2nd, and there is a launch party in the 2nd or 3rd week of November. It should be on my email lists. If you send me your email, I can send you information about this. But it's both the books, The Growing Up Jewish in India and I Am Hava, are already available on Amazon if you type in the title. Besides also doing commissions, which I do a lot, I have many other commissions coming up too, where I'm also, for example, in the future, going to design 19 Torah covers for a synagogue in Long Island, and several other, synagogue commissions like that I will be doing in the next year or two. But I also want to make my art available for every kind of person. So if somebody cannot purchase an expensive painting, they can either get a print or they can buy a shawl and have it as wearable art. And so I'm showing this because I feel like, as an artist, I feel like I want to extend the availability of my work, not to just a certain kind of people or a certain class of people, but to everybody, so that they can own a piece of my art if they want to. So I make silk shawls, and the one on the extreme right, which is modeled by my daughter actually, is the synagogue floor that has been made into a talit. We are doing a 2nd edition of the prints of that talit sometime soon, so it will be on my website also sometime soon. I also make yoga mats, where my work is translated into made in the US, high quality, thicker yoga mats that are also available on my website, Blue Like Me. Here's another of my yoga mats that are available. Now, moving on to a couple other series. I have many other series of works which you can see on my website, like the Exodus series, which is about refugees. I've done several new works, like the one behind me, and which again talks about Lilith. And I've also done a large triptych, which will also be on my website sometime soon. So between my commissions, I tend to do my own work so that I can have exhibitions. I have several exhibitions coming up next year. There'll be a tour right through the Midwest of my work, since museums are now opening up. So I'm happy that is happening and people are actually being able to go into museums. But this is a few examples of my Fulbright India project, which is called Faces Weaving Indian Jewish Narratives, which was my first Fulbright in India. What I pretty much did is I took photographs of different families or different people. I recorded them on video. I asked them questions. I asked them about their Jewish identity in India. And then based on their stories or what they told me, I did photo collage paintings. So I did photo collages on the computer with the help of my assistant. I sent it out to be printed in large 3 by 3 feet pieces of paper, photographic paper. And then when it came back, I painted on it. In this case, her story, which stayed very prominently in my mind was about the fact that how she respected all other religions, and Hinduism was always outside the garden walls of her home, outside, never inside, because she didn't believe in idol worship. And so Eliyahu Hanavi is on in the inside of her garden, and outside is the Hinduism and other religions that she respects but doesn't entertain in her home, because she was very strictly brought up Jewish. So that stuck out as being like how in a multicultural India, how you can still keep your identity in that way. And this is my mother. You saw her earlier in her wedding picture. I photographed her. Her story was very unique. She owned and managed a school for 20 years from K through 4th grade. She became very popular in Bandra, the suburb of Mumbai. A lot of the Bollywood kids would send their kids to her school because it was a small private school in my home that grew in size. And so her stories and what she gave my daughter when she used to come many, many times to visit us and live with us and stay with us was, and she died in 2012, was I mean, the whole Fulbright project, she died after that, actually was a commemoration for, and this book is actually dedicated to both my parents, but especially to the Jewish identity that she instilled in me very strongly growing up Jewish in India. And for example, Daniel Elijah was an older gentleman I met. He used to go to this synagogue, to his synagogue in Pune and pray almost every day. So I recorded his prayers in the synagogue in Pune. And then shortly after that, I came back and he had passed away. So I was very fortunate to have to record his story. So I found his face was like something that could be on a coin. So I cut out the face. I put it in the center of the synagogue that he prayed in. My student assistant helped me. We did the gold leafing around the face, and kind of like a coin, I modeled his face in this gold leaf like halo and against the synagogue that he prayed in. And that became a piece about who he was. The birds are symbolizing the departed soul, so to speak, because he had died by the time I made this piece about a year or so later. Here's a story of the Indian Jewish bride and how, again, the mix of cultures. She's got a little veil. She's got an Indian sari. She's sitting at her henna ceremony, the Mehndi ceremony or the henna ceremony. All Indian Jewish brides have go through. And here is the basic layout of her piece. And that's her final piece, where I painted her in her bridal dress with her hennaed hands and her husband's black and white talit. I photographed that, and different iconography related to family, newlyweds, and her love of Warli art, where she would like this kind of tribal art, and she told me that she liked that. So I did the whole story about her and her family in that style of this village Warli art, which is comes from Maharashtra, where she lives. And then going on to the next Fulbright, I have many, many more examples of the Indian Fulbright, which if you go on my website, you will see under the Fulbright page that you will see all the examples of the Indian Fulbright. I photographed about 70 or so people, and I made a project of about 42 people. And so that whole series is available, and also it gets exhibited a lot. And hopefully one day I would like it to be in a museum altogether. So that's why I have not spread it out or decided to sell it. So those are available for exhibition, and will be in exhibitions starting next year. This is the Israel project, and this is a Bene Israel synagogue in Beersheba. And this is their Simchat Torah celebrations that I photographed from the balcony upstairs. And the project in Israel, what I did for my Fulbright project was very different. I photographed different generations against black cloth. So this is a grandmother who is a Kochini Jew, her granddaughter who is half Kochini, part Kochini, part Bene Israel, and part Ashkenazi. So their daughter had married an Ashkenazi man. So she was a little bit of everything. And so I'm going to overlap these faces one on top of the other and make 3D lenticular prints that means when you walk by the photographs, you will see both the faces, one on top of the other, and they will be merged together as you move side to side. So it's a very special kind of technique. I'm in the process of making them. They are very expensive to make. So as I get grant money, I make more and more of them to finish the project. Here's my cousin and his son. This is, he's Bene Israel, his wife is Kuchini, and his son is in the IDF. And so I have combined faces like that of different generations. Here are two sisters. The father is Bene Israel. The mother is Yemenite Jew in this case. So here are two of the 5 daughters of this family. Here's a Bene Israel Jew. Her name is Ilana. She married a Romanian Jew, and that's her daughter, Zohar. So this cultural melange that happened, which I saw over there, and the stories that they shared, and the fact that Ilana was born and brought up in Israel, and she had a completely Israeli accent and remembered, but she still clung on, or she just still celebrated her Indian Jewishness and shared that with her children, was very wonderful to see. Here is mother and daughter. Both of them are Kuchini Jews. So that's Mira and her daughter, and they both live in Nevatim, which is a Kuchini community, which is near Beersheba. And actually in Nevatim, there is going to be a brand new Indian Jewish museum going to be built sometime very soon, which represents all of the Indian Jewish communities. I'm sort of involved with working with them, and I'm hoping that this will happen sometime in the near future. Here is another father and son. Both of them are Bene Israels. So as you can see, this is a relative of mine. Some of them look very Indian, some of them don't. So it's he's sort of my cousin uncle, actually my uncle, and he was never mistaken for being Indian. He looked a little, Romanian or Russian or something like that. And so this cultural mixtures of faces, my mother not looking very Jewish and not looking very Indian actually, but looking like she was from Iran or from some other country, was very fascinating to people when she was in India. So this mixture of faces was very fascinating, and I could capture that in these projects of mine. These are the 3D lenticular prints. I've taken my daughter's face, and you can see you can change the face by overlapping it and doing this technique of printing through 3D lenticular prints where both the faces become one, but when you move from side to side, you can see the overlapping of the different generation of faces. And last of all, here are my websites to explore more if you would like. artsiona.com is my art website, and Blue Like Me is my merchandise website, which is linked to one another. And I end over here, and I would love to have questions from the audience.
Great.
All right.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Terrific. Will you unshare the screen, and we'll go through questions. So people, please feel free to chat your questions. Some people have already chatted questions. I'm going to open up the questions to everybody. So a variety of questions. First of all, your art is fantastic, very different. I don't know if I've seen anybody else who has done your art, certainly not within the Jewish world. And also what you talked about kind of overlaps many of the programs done for CSP. For example, we recently hosted a series about the variety of Jewish communities in Yerucham, which is a development town in the Negev in Israel. And the first program was the Bene Israel in this town. And so that was quite interesting, and we'll tie into a question that I have. Also, Bert Wysotsky just taught for us and is coming back to teach for us. So you do connect a lot, but in a very different way. So one question I had is, I learned from our program about the Bene Israel in Yerucham that Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, is a big personality, probably more important to the Bene Israel maybe than most Jewish communities. And yet I haven't seen him in any of your art. Do you specifically not include him, or is he included, we just didn't see?
Yeah, actually, I do have him in a few pieces. I just sold a piece to a Canadian buyer of mine, an older piece of mine, which is Finding Home number 30. If you go on my website, I couldn't show all of my work, obviously, but in that piece, in that painting, I show myself sitting in a red Eliyahu Hanavi chariot. But in this case, that chariot is taking me from one shore to the other shore. My parents are standing on one shore. My mother is waving goodbye to me. My father had just passed away, so I showed him kind of shrouded in his talit. And on the other side is like the American shore with my husband and my daughter waiting for me. And I'm sitting in the chariot with a book in my hand, suggesting that I went to study over there. So it doesn't directly, it came up. I mean, I've used him in like the Fulbright series where I did about one of the pieces where I actually have shown the print of the Eliyahu Hanavi, which was in almost every Jewish home in India, my grandmother's home. And in the book, Growing Up Jewish in India, there's a picture actually over there, which I found of the torn, like very kind of, picture of Eliyahu Hanavi from my grandmother's home. And when I asked the editor, Ori Soltis, to say, should I like Photoshop it and make it nice for the book? He said, no, leave it all torn over there. We want to print it that way to show that it came from your grandmother's home. So, and I think Eliyahu Hanavi is sort of like, my art is not about depicting something actually all the time. It comes in many kind of veiled forms. Like, for example, in that painting where I am sitting in Eliyahu Hanavi's chariot, and Eliyahu Hanavi's chariot is helping me go from one shore to another. So in that cases.
So Karen wants to know what type of paint you use, and maybe talk a little about your medium and how you do your work.
Sure. I use a lot of, I've studied Western art and Eastern art, right? So in Western art, I've done everything from oil painting to acrylic to watercolor, all of that. I've tried it all. But in India, when I studied a little bit Indian miniature painting, and I was told, why are you studying Indian miniature painting? Because it's tourist art. I still was always drawn to it. And I felt like it was important, and I didn't know how I would use it, but I just kept at it. And there I was taught like the traditional paintings, like how if I went to this teacher in Rajasthan in Jaipur, and he would be sitting on the floor and he actually mixes the organic paints and little seashells, and he would paint with very different organic kind of paints. And then when I took him some watercolor or some gouache, to share with him, he was delighted because he was like, oh my God, this is such wonderful color. And it's so different. And you don't have to mix or make the color. You can just sort of squeeze it out of the tube. So because of after becoming a mother, and I felt like there was no time for me to do all of that, like making paper or whatever it took, I started using Holbein gouache. So I mostly use Holbein gouache. I also use a little bit of golden fluid acrylics, a little bit, depending on what I'm painting with. And also I use 22 karat gold leaf, which comes from Germany. Actually, I have it right here. It comes in a box like this, and it comes in very fine sheets of paper, which it's stuck to a different paper, and then it comes in these kind of sheets. So you can apply it. This is 22 karat gold leaf. So I use a lot of 22 karat gold leaf in my work. And I also sometimes I use the regular acrylics, but it depends where I'm painting and how. But mostly in my smaller paintings, I use gouache paint.
I remember when I was in India seeing many of the miniatures around, also for sale. Bimya, who's a resident of San Diego, says that in Balboa Park in San Diego, in the San Diego Museum of Art, they have the largest collection of Indian miniatures outside of India.
Yes.
So I pass, if you're interested by that and you want to go see more,
I've already
go down
seen
to San
it,
Diego. Let's see, what you talk about Lilith. Does Lilith appear in lots of your images, or you just showed us someone happened to be disproportionate that she was there? Is she an important character for you?
I think all the bad women are interesting to me, like Tamar or Miriam, why she asked the difficult questions, or Lilith, or even Eve, why, like she was, the women who sort of ask difficult questions. And I feel Lilith really is like a kind of a Medusa. She's also kind of like a Kali figure, which is an Indian goddess who changes her form according to, for protecting you. And people always think Kali is somebody who's supposed to be feared, but she's not. She just changes her form to combat evil. And so I feel Lilith is sort of misjudged in that similar way. And I feel that Lilith in mythology was the first wife of Adam. And, studying that with Rabbi Burton Vysotsky and finding out that the alphabet of Ben Sira had a whole essay about her and how she was the first wife of Adam, but all she wanted was equality. She didn't get it. And so she goes and lives in the Red Sea and she never comes back. And then we have a more subservient Eve, but then she messes up too, So those kind of stories that are like not filtered in that way, like we would when we go to synagogue, is very interesting to me when I study with the rabbis.
Thank you. We'll probably have to do a program on Lilith because I think that she's not that well known in mainstream Jewish world.
I'll be happy to share her.
Let's see. You talked about how the world you lived in influenced your art. We can see the influences from the native Indian population around you in their art and the Muslim world. But you mentioned Zoroastrianism. So I'm wondering, how does that play out in your art, if at all?
So my parents wanted me to go to English medium schools, and I always spoke mostly English with my parents because Jewish people were sort of anglicized and, neither belonged here nor there. So we were like, are we Indian? Are we Israeli? What are we, what's home kind of thing. So always that question was there. And so British India was always, Jews were working, unfortunately, for British people a lot because they were like Anglo-Indians, so to speak. So I studied English and I spoke English a lot, even though my one grandmother spoke a lot of English and the second one did not. So when I went to school, my parents chose to send me to a convent school because it was the best English education from kindergarten through 5th grade. And then 6th grade onwards, there was a bigger, better private school near my home, which was a Zoroastrian school. It was called Petit High School, Avabai Petit. And you ask any Indian, like there are 2 Petit schools in Mumbai, and they're very famous. And so this was this beautiful school on the top of this hill, right across from the Arabian Sea. Gorgeous campus, and it was run by a Parsi trust, and Tata and these kind of people had a lot of money there. And so this school was a really wonderful high school that I went to. And so I was introduced a lot to Zoroastrian culture, and I had a lot of Parsi friends. And actually till today, I have a WhatsApp group of both the schools, the Catholic school and the Zoroastrian school that we keep in touch with.
Quite interesting. People have asked, how has your art changed over the years?
How's my art changed?
Yeah. Has it changed? How has it changed?
Wow. Yeah, of course. I mean, it has to evolve. Otherwise, I would be dead.
But can you explain how it's changed? Is there a specific trajectory, or, are you using different colors? Are you using different themes? How has it changed, I guess?
So I feel like when I was much younger, like any artist, I was always searching for who I am, what's my style, what have I got to say? Is it pertinent? Why am I an artist? Why can't I just be a, banker and just go to work and come back and drink my beer and watch football games? Why can't I be normal? And so I would always kind of question, like, why am I doing this? And so in the beginning, I felt like I was constantly searching for, like every artist does, who you are, what your style is. And so I found it very difficult in the beginning. I can say this, people will find it interesting. I found it very difficult to have a face in my work. Like, for one thing, number one, is because it was drilled into me that no figurative work is what is allowed in the Jewish tradition because it's idol worship. Later on, I realized, and I was told even by Rabbi Burton Vysotsky, there is nothing written like that you cannot paint figures, because even the oldest synagogues in the Roman world had figures on the floor and in the mosaic. So that's nonsense. You cannot just worship figures, and so it's okay to paint them. just that being drilled into you as a child, but then also being able to find what face can I paint to the figures that I paint, what shade of brown should I paint, what shade of, what would she or he look like? So I did a lot of shrouded figures, like in like dark green saris with like almost dark faces, and was hidden into the cavity of the, with hands and feet, but like very mysterious, because I think I couldn't find the right face. I couldn't find the right identity, and I was still searching. And then suddenly I did my theater set design, and I thought I was becoming a set designer. And after I finished set design, I realized, I mean, I had my child and I was at home for a couple of years because of the small child. And I started really thinking about my identity and what do I really want to say. And I started looking at my theatrical renderings and seeing how beautiful and delicate they were, just like the Indian miniature paintings. And that's when I started painting some figures, and some faces came about. And then the faces were skin colored. But then I started thinking about Krishna and about being different. And then I thought about being blue and the color of the sky. And so my first blue characters were the first few in the Finding Home series, you can say in the early teens of the Finding Home series, where I started seeing the blue face appear again and again. And so that is the evolution of the blue face. And as an artist in general, I'm constantly experimenting, changing. I also am fortunate enough to get different commissions. So the commissions push me to try different things also. I'm doing 2 private commissions right now. They are, it's nice to kind of talk to people and get into their heads and see what they want, and, and kind of, see through their eyes what they want to live with. And then that I give them a painting that they will love and not just tolerate in their home. So that's kind of a challenge to do. And so that evolution is very interesting for me too. I don't want to go on, but it's this other question.
I think that was great. That was a great answer. Phyllis Gilmore, one of our longtime patrons, asks a question. She wants to know, what color blue is your blue? And did it take you like a long time to get that blue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely my blue. I own it 100%. I mean, anybody else can use that blue, but I'll use it like in a way where, I mean, I tell people, I joke with people, I say, can't you see? Like, my skin is blue. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah, can't you see that? So my blue is kind of a light peacock blue. It has to be that certain shade because I thought, first make it more cobalt, or I could make it more ultramarine, light ultramarine or dark ultramarine. So it took a lot of experimentation. But I think the best color that I found was the light peacock, because of the openness and the brightness of that peacock color. When you mix with the right amount of white, gives you that sort of like ability to shade the skin so that you can get the modulations of the face. And at the same time, it's just because it's blue, it doesn't look like it's dead. It still looks alive somehow, strangely. And so it took a lot of experimentation to find out which kind of blue I could make my own.
It's amazing to see the blue, on a screen. I assume in person it's even more amazing. So people have asked, how can they see your work in person in the next few months or few years? Someone said, if you're going to the Midwest, or you're going to Kansas, for example. So where will your art be?
Oh, wow. Surprising. There somebody from Kansas here?
I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to say this, but there are 2 venues. Absolutely. See, museums are just opening up. So there are 2 venues. There's one, Norton Center for the Arts in Kentucky, in conjunction with Center College, is definitely going to have my solo show starting in January. Then that show is going to travel midsummer to fall to the Milwaukee Jewish Museum. And then there are a couple more venues, one of them being in Kansas, probably, that is not sure, that might happen. And another one in another town in the Midwest that is also in the works. So that this show will then go on for at least a year and a half, 2 years. So every museum will have it for at least 4 to 6 months.
We tend to have people, from the East Coast and West Coast in this program, and we have people in between. So what about New York and like East Coast, New York, Boston, and California?
Right. So before the pandemic, I had a show in San Diego, and just days before that, and I actually had to close down because of the pandemic. halfway through. I'm in a group show, which is called Holy Sparks. It's a group show, but I've done one piece, and it is HUC in Manhattan is going to have the show travel to the Skirball Museum in Cincinnati, and also to the Bard. It's kind of a theater slash exhibiting space in LA. And it's going to be starting early next year, and it'll be a year-long, at least, exhibition, but it's a group show, and I'll just have one piece in there. And so there are like 30 some artists paired with different rabbis, and we've done a piece based on our interaction with that rabbi. So it's called it's actually with women rabbis, women artists with women rabbis. So that's going to be traveling, but only one piece. So shows are slowly opening up. I'm excited about this group show of mine, which is going to start traveling in Kentucky. And I've never really exhibited that much in the Midwest. So I'm excited to kind of see whether those other two venues also materialize in the Midwest. And I will keep you informed.
Yeah, keep us. I will tell the group. Last few questions. One question was, have you made prayer shawls, talitot, available with your art? Are those on your site?
So the CRC's floor, that was made into a talit, and it is gorgeous. I mean, it's just, so they made 200 talit and they sold out. And then the pandemic happened. And so we were stalled. And so now I think we're thinking of remaking it. So in the next couple months, hopefully in time for Hanukkah, I hope to have another few talit available on my website and on the CRC website for sale, but they come in two different sizes. One is a larger one for men, but women have bought it too, and then slightly narrower one for women, the talit with the CRC floor on the center, and it has the stripes and it has holes on the foreside for the tzitzit and everything. So it should be available again, but we sold out about just before the pandemic. So
Nancy wants to know how important text is to your work. So Jewish text, I assume. Is that when you do your work, do you start from a Jewish text? Do you paint and then think of a Jewish text? Can you tell us about that relationship between text and work?
So I'll give you an example of what I'm doing right now. I'm doing a commission for the CEO of Coca-Cola, and it's for his private home, one of his homes in Manhattan. And so his wife's name is Rachel and his daughter's name is Rebecca. And so he said, can you do a Midrash about Rachel and Rebecca? So I consulted with a few rabbis, and I have already know the stories of Rachel and Rebecca, but in this case, the roles are reversed. You know, the daughter was Rebecca and the mother was Rachel, in which case, in the actual story, Rebecca is the mother-in-law of Rachel. So it was interesting to kind of read the story, but then also take into perspective the patrons who have commissioned me, and bring something about them into it. So these people have traveled a lot all over the world, and they've actually lived in India for a couple of years. So they wanted me to give like Indian dresses to the two characters. And the main thing is like finding the main icons about the two. For example, water is very important, both for Rachel and Rebecca. The well, they met their fate, or they met their husbands, or they met the turning points in their life happened at the well. So these kind of symbols like that, many of them are going to be featured into the painting, but at the same time, making them contemporary women, like there are two women at the well today, talking to each other, having a dialogue. And actually in the Midrash, in the actual story, Rachel never meets Rebecca because she dies on the way. She dies before going, she was with Jacob, but then she dies on the way. So it's kind of a cosmic meeting of Rachel and Rebecca. So this kind of way of interpreting stories is very exciting for me.
Thank you. And now, do you have a book that's just of your art?
I have several catalogs. I have a beautiful catalog actually made by my past gallery in Manhattan, and it's not on my website, but if anybody writes to me, I could send it to them if they like.
Okay. Great questions, great program. Really nice to meet you and have you meet with our group and talk about your art. And I'm sure people have never really seen art like this, just in the Jewish world. So you are very talented, obviously, in many media or mediums, and yeah, I think I will share your website with everybody again. Someone said there's a thing on YouTube about you that came out today. Am I missing? Is there something that you know of that came out today or just recently about you? So they put it in.
With these books coming out, there's constantly a lot of things in social media and otherwise. I mean, my children's book just got a Kirkus review, I heard, so must be something pertaining to that. So we've been getting really good responses. And you know, I mean, I just was thinking today, I have a marketing agent in LA too, and I was just telling him, like, I want to do like a program on how do artists survive the pandemic. And I think you know, it's kind of strange, like so many professions really suffered, but I think as an artist myself, it was the best years for me because of people thinking about art, going inwards, asking themselves, looking at their walls and asking for something on there that is meaningful. And, you know, I was one of the few that could provide that. So I'm very lucky that way. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, last question to you. So you were commissioned to do a Megillat Esther, Scroll of Esther, right? Is that something that we can see, first of all, and can people get a copy? Can you buy a copy of that, or is that made as a private art? Oh, it is.
No, so the original which is made on real parchment, real animal skin, belongs to the person who commissioned me. But he's given me permission that I could scan it, and I have a limited edition of the copies of the scroll in actual size. I have sold them to many synagogues, rabbis, private homes, people. So this way, you know, like for me, the sustenance, you know, continues of me being able to get something out of just a commission that just ended, and also people can enjoy copies of it at a much cheaper price. Yeah, so they're available.
So we'll look. So that's on your website, one of those two sites.
The under commissions, the Megillat Esther is there, but if you want a copy, you would have to email me, because I don't have everything on sale. So I mean, it should be, but this particular Megillat Esther is not. If anybody wants to inquire about getting a copy, it is available. Yes.
So we're looking forward to seeing your Bad Jewish Woman tour come to California and Boston and New York. Like, it'd be great T-shirts. Just think about it. Something that'd be great.
I know. It's endless.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to thank you again. We hope to have you back for some other programs. And yeah, I think that many more questions to ask, but we're out of time. So I'm going to say, on behalf of CSP, thank you for joining us, and thank you, CSP people, for joining us for this program. Our goal at CSP is to bring you a variety of programs. I think this fits in. Very different, yet ties into Bert Vizatsky. He'll be back to us. Ties into our program with Bene Israel and Yerucham, and questions about people have asked questions about the community and about Bene Israel and how they're doing today and where they live and how, like, your traditions. But I think we'll get there in the next program with you. We'll save it. It'll be like
I'm
part
just reading all the comments. They're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Go to Siona's website. Enjoy. Good to see you. And don't forget, we're celebrating Barney Gilmore's birthday, November 7th. We're having a live program with Achinoam Nini in conversation. So looking forward to having you. Ralphie, Girard, keep doing all your work, your great work. And Ralphie will email me his contact if you're going to India. You can email Ralphie before you go, and he'll set you up. Or you can go on a tour with Ralphie and maybe Siona or other people. Lots of great things coming up. We just got rid of this little bug, this pandemic. But in the meantime, enjoy your creative time, everybody, and we'll see you Thursday. Thanks.
Bye, Ralphie. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody.